I want you to picture a 63-year-old woman on a couch. This woman is white and small. She has thin gray hair that she got permed 2 weeks ago at a Marlino beauty salon in San Francisco for only $16.75. Clothes that she bought at 3 thrift stores on Mission Street. She has a book in her hand, and the book is called Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. This book is about Soviet research into telepathy. And she had been reading it years ago on a temple trip to Chicago, but she lost her copy at a meeting. And ever since then, she couldn't find another one until, whoa, she stumbles on a copy at the temple right before she leaves. Now she's reading it because she just wants to finish it before the boat leaves. Even though, the boat that day was supposed to leave the next day at 4:30. However, the boat's actually not going to leave tomorrow at 4:30. The boat's not going to leave until the Friday after that. However, she doesn't know this yet. She's been in Guyana for 48 hours. Her name is Edith Roller. She's a retired professor, English. She worked for the State Department in India and Pakistan in the 90s. She has a master's degree. She speaks more than one language. She has read more books than your grandmother has read in 3 lifetimes. She is, by every measure of the word that the United States has ever used, a smart woman. She's no one's fool. And this morning at 10 o'clock, she is taken in a van to the Guyanese immigration office, where a younger woman from the People's Temple, whose name was Shawanda inside the house and Sharon Amos to the outside world, she sits her down, Miss Edith, before they walk in, and she briefs her on how to lie, how to answer the questions, what to say her purpose in Guyana was, what not to mention, and what to leave out. And this afternoon, after Miss Edith eats her lunch, she finds out that one of her jobs for tomorrow, one of the assigned chores that she had been given alongside cleaning the garage and watering the yard and sweeping the floors, was that another woman in the office, in the house, a black woman named Shanda Oliver, was going to take everyone's stool samples to the health office. Stool samples, y'all. 63-year-old Edith Roller, retired English professor. She was an alumni of Stanford and the United States Foreign Service. She gives a stool sample to a woman she's known for 2 days so that this woman could carry it across Georgetown, Guyana in January 1978 to a health office so that the Guyanese government would let Edith board a riverboat into the interior of the jungle, where she planned to spend the rest of her life teaching English to other people's children at a place called Jonestown. And Miss Ma'am did it. She did not blink. She put her poop in the cup. And then she went and sat on the couch. And on the couch, she read her Soviet parapsychology book until dinner. The dinner was fish. And after dinner, the household had a meeting where the new arrivals went around and they shared the last things that happened to them in the States that made them glad to be here. And they were very glad to be here. And then a man named Richard Janero puts on a film, and the film was On a Clear Day You Can See Forever with Barbra Streisand. This is a musical from 1970s about a woman who, under hypnosis, remembers being someone else in another life. So they watch this movie, they drink Pepsi, they eat fried sweet cassava, which Edith would write in her journal that night tasted like potato chips. And the radio crackles. The voice on the radio said something about the new watering system in the fields, like the irrigation type of a system. And this voice on the radio belongs to a man 200 miles south of here in a clearing in the jungle, who in the next 10 months was going to put a gun to the back of his own head and order the killing of 918 people, including the woman on the couch, including the woman who taught her how to lie at immigration, including the woman taking the stool samples, including the toddler being toilet trained, the little toddler Monique being toilet trained in the next room. She had no idea. She just thought it was a Thursday, This is the opening scene of the series, and this is where we're starting. Not in a hospital hallway, not in a bar in Indiana, not at a wedding. Here. I want to start here on a couch in Guyana with a Soviet parapsychology book in a woman's hand and a Streisand musical on the screen and a cup of not urine, a cup of poop, stool, in another woman's care on its way to a government health office. Because this is what dying looked like before it looked like dying, like a Thursday. So this is part 1, the stool sample. Okay, so I want to do some housekeeping because if you've been watching true crime for any amount of time, you could be wondering, like, where is Jim? Where is the cult guy? Where's the rant about the Messiah baby, the chicken liver? Why are you watching or talking about a 63-year-old woman read a book? And I understand, but I want to kind of do this differently from other ways that the Jonestown is covered. So a lot of versions of this story starts with him. They start with Jim, little Jim, dead animals, the Cassock factory, the Messiah Mama, or they start with the death tape, or they start with the Kool-Aid, which by the way was not Kool-Aid, and we're gonna deal with that in the final episode of this series. I think it'll be about like 11, 12 parts. Or they start with Leo Ryan getting shot at the airstrip in Port Katuma. My issue with that for me is that a lot of those angles makes Jim Jones the protagonist of his own murders because they kind of, in a way, put him at the center of the frame, right? And I have nothing against people who've done it this way. Like, it actually makes a lot more sense. And it's how I've learned a lot more about the series in a chronological way. And I think that is, like, essential and needed. There's very good coverage, like Stephanie Harlow has a very good coverage. It's a very good series. She has a whole cult series. So if you like listening to true crime and learning about our history and things that have happened, I definitely, like, think she's an amazing place to start or go. Bose versus the World is another content creator that I love. Crime Atlas. I watch them all, child. I watch them all, okay? But I just don't want to put Jim Jones at the center, okay? I just don't, okay? I don't want to make the story about him. Not for me. Not this way. Because I feel like by the time that, like, we get to the part where the 918 real human people die when you started with him, that is almost like you've been watching the Jim show for so long that the people who died don't even really have names anymore. They just kind of feel like a number at the end of the Jim show, more of like a punchline, more like a receipt, more like them being the proof that Jim was bad, if that makes any sense. I just don't want to do that. The 918 people who died at Jonestown were not props or Jim's body count or gullible. And I love the fact that I've never heard a modern day content creator ever spin it that way or talk about it that way. At least I have been blessed to not have to find that because I would feel gaslighted, I think. Like if somebody was saying like, oh, like the People's Temple were, if they were just, I'm not even going to repeat what they could say, but if anyone was to just take it out of context and just pin them as something that they're not to me, like, I don't know. Anyway, but these are people who really had lives and who chose things and believed things and who did things, including sometimes terrible things to each other, including sometimes beautiful things for each other. They're just not Blink, and I wanna meet them first. Not all of them. There are, 918, okay? I cannot tell you about all of them, and honestly, I wish I could, um, and I'm gonna do my best. And in episode 11 of the series, I think I wanna sit down and introduce as many as I can of them, like, in an hour. But for this episode, for part 1, if you're here with me, I just want you to meet Edith. Because for me is a very good witness. She's a door. Edith kept a journal. She basically wrote what she ate for breakfast. She wrote down what movies they watched, what books she was reading, who was crying in the kitchen, which child was being toilet trained, little Monique, which woman she had an argument about the dishes, Jewel Wilson, if my memory's calling me correct. Edith basically wrote it down, all down, every day for years, in a little tiny careful hand on newspaper, or not newspaper, notebook paper in her cabinet at Jonestown by lantern light after 16-hour workdays when she got to Jonestown. And Miss Edith died at Jonestown on November 18th, 1978, but her journal did not. Her journal survived her. These pages were actually collected as evidence by the FBI, and they got assigned a case number RYMUR 89 4286 C 2 A 1, and they sat in a vault for years. And eventually, a man named Don Beck, he's a former People's Temple member who got out before the end, he sat down and he transcribed every single one of those handwritten pages by hand, and he put them all online at the Jonestown Institute at San Diego State University, where you and I can read them right now in 2026 for free on a website that I'm going to make sure I be linking at the end of this at the end of the series, and probably every series, because they are my biggest resource for so much more information about this entire situation. It's like, Edith, let's get back to my girl. because she left us her Thursday, right? She left us every Thursday from 1975 when she joined the temple in San Francisco until the end of November of 1978 when she couldn't write any more Thursdays. And what is in those journals, I think, is the answer to the questions this entire series is kind of asking, which is how did this happen? Not to the cult members or to the followers, not to these people, but to people who read books and teach school and get their hair done and eat fish for dinner and watch Streisand movies. You know, people like your aunt, people like your professor or your mom or maybe you. So I want to start with her. Okay. I want to start on the couch, January 19, 1978, in a house in Georgetown, Guyana, with a book in her hands and a stool sample in another woman's care and a Streisand musical about to start. Because if you don't see her on this couch, I feel like none of what I'm going to tell you over the next 11 to 12 episodes is going to land right. And you have to love her first. So that's the deal. Let's meet her. Edith Roller was 63 years old, and I have to keep saying this because it keeps not registering sometimes, even for me, when I like really like say it or think about it. But like 63, right? Like an age where, to me, you've lived a whole life already, okay? And you have opinions, and you have furniture, and you have a credit card, and a social security number, and you have somewhere to go for the holidays. 63 is not like a runaway age, right? It's a grown age. To me, 63 is past the age where most people are still capable of being taken in, basically, by a man in dark glasses with a vision, which is all of him, okay? That's the whole point of being 63. You've seen the men with the visions who said that the world is going to end in 2 days from now because the date looks good to them or something, you know? You've been through those visions, so you know what they are. Edith was born in Colorado in 1915. She got a college education back when not many women and almost no working class women got one. She got a master's degree and she worked in the 1950s for the US Foreign Service. She was posted in India. She was posted in Pakistan. She traveled and studied. She reads in 3 different languages. She came home and she taught English at community colleges in the Bay Area. She had a sister named Dorothy, who in this very journal she calls Dor, D-O-R, who lived back in East somewhere. And she was worried about her sister, Edith, Miss Dor was, because Dor did not trust this church that Edith had joined. She was like, oh, I ain't got it to do with these people. And Miss Edith also had a friend named Lore, L-O-R. She was a woman who she'd been close to for years, this old friend from San Francisco State, and she was helping her manage her money and her affairs basically while she lived overseas. So you see, Edith had people, and she had a life, and she had a sister who loved her, and a friend who loved her, and a job, and a savings account, and a permanent and a checkbook and opinions about Soviet parapsychology research. Edith was nobody's victim or nobody's fool, is what I'm getting at. But in 1975, in her early 60s, she walked into the People's Temple on Gary Boulevard in San Francisco, and she sat down and she listened to a service. And she decided that this was the most serious, progressive organization she had ever been in a room yet. Now, I want to stop you right there because I feel like there's probably maybe like an inner temptation to like think like maybe she was old and lonely. Maybe she didn't have a lot of people. Maybe that's why she joined. But again, I think I've proven the point that she's not lonely. She had a sister. She had a lore, L-O-R. She had a whole social network of leftist friends in the Bay Area from her years of teaching and organizing. Even in no short words, she was not desperate. She was political. She was a committed leftist who had been watching the United States of America for 6 decades and came to the entirely reasonable conclusion that this country was not going to fix itself. And she was looking for a serious institution to put her remaining years in. And in 1975 in San Francisco, the most serious institution she could find by every external measure was the People's Temple. You see, the temple in 1975 was running in San Francisco and in Red Valley up north, exactly the operation I told you about earlier. They were doing free medical clinics, drug rehab, senior care homes with Marceline Jones, Jim Jones' wife, nursing license on the paperwork, foster homes for kids the state could not place, a legal aid service, y'all, a free meal program, voter registration drives in the Fillmore that turned thousands of people out on demand, photo ops with the mayor, a relationship with Rosaline Carter, who I believe, or was it Roseanne Carter? I don't remember exactly her name, but I believe she was a political figure in that time frame. A band, a newspaper, a bus fleet that ran up and down the California coast every week. If you walked into the People's Temple in San Francisco in 1975, what you saw was the most successful interracial progressive organization on the West Coast of the United States. And that was not marketing, that was just the truth. And the most respectable, most credentialed, most politically connected progressive figures in California were publicly endorsing it. Edith was not stupid for joining. Edith was informed. She joined the way that you might join the ACLU or Doctors Without Borders or your local union. She joined because the work looked real and the people looked serious and the country had failed her values, and here was a place that was not failing. So she put her savings into it. She moved into Temple affiliated housing on O'Farrell Street in San Francisco with two other women, Wanda and Jose or Josie, who were also Temple members. She took her name off of things and her checks went into the church and her life braided into the church. And that's how it works. That's how it always works. An inch a week. You do not notice you're being eaten alive because every single bite is just so small. And by January 1978, this was fully in. She had a job. I can't never pronounce it, but it's got things called Bechtel, Bechtel. It's an engineering firm where she had been a clerical worker. You know, that company also does have or has had known ties to the CIA, which I think is very interesting. She did kind of say she did a little bit of work for them, and this is the most realistic way. It actually just makes me think about a series of unfortunate events, but I digress. So she was going to Guyana, Miss Edith. She was leaving her apartment, her sister Dorothy, her friend Loar, and she's going to Guyana. She's 63 years old, and she is going to a town in the jungle of South America voluntarily because the church had built a settlement there, and the settlement was supposed to be the most realized version of what the church had been promising in San Francisco the whole time. It was integrated, self-sufficient, it was socialist in the way the temple used that word, which mainly meant we take care of each other. It was supposed to be the place where everything they had been building in California finally got to be the real deal, away from the racism and the surveillance and the press and the United States government, which Jim Jones on the radio was telling them every single day was about to put them all in concentration camps. You see, the threat was exactly always bad enough to require leaving with him the way he would spin it. And you'll see this pattern again, and you'll see it in every episode. So Edith got on a United flight on January 16, 1978. She flew with 5 other Temple members, including a young woman named Joel Wilson, who Edith was about to have a whole month of disagreements with about kitchen work, and a man named Harold Cordell. They flew through JFK. They sat in the terminal in the snow because their connection was delayed. Edith ate a ham and cheese on an English muffin that cost $2.50, and she noted the price in her journal because she was a woman who had been keeping track of her money her whole life, and she was not going to stop now. They flew to Trinidad, they flew to Georgetown, they landed at midnight, and they were picked up by Temple staff in 2 vans and driven to the People's Temple House in La Maya Gardens. This is basically where they would all wait before they would officially be taken into the jungle. I think it was about 200 miles away. It's a very difficult place to even get to in the first place, let alone try to make a livable, sustainable town, Jonestown, for everybody to live. But on January 19, 1978, a Thursday, y'all remember? After 2 days in the Georgetown house, the house that you are at before you get to actual Jonestown. The Georgetown house is kind of, and I'll go into it more later, but the Georgetown house is kind of like it's like the meeting place beforehand because the travel and the trek was very dangerous and long to get to Georgetown in the first or Jonestown in the first place. So Georgetown was kind of like the home that was in the middle of more of like where the life was at in Guyana. Like people and civilians were living in Guyana, the citizens, and then the sector of land that the Guyanese government actually gave Jim Jones to have for his people was more so like in the midst of like this thicket of woods, basically. But we have Edith Roller. She's a retired English professor, citizen of the United States of America. master's degree, former foreign service, sister of Dorothy, friend of lore, LOL, sat down on a couch and read her Soviet parapsychology book and gave a stool sample and watched a Streisand musical and ate fried cassava. Because that is who she was. That is the woman. That is the door. So let's actually talk about the house. This is the house that they would get to first. And I want to talk about it because Edith is going to spend 8 days in this house before she actually gets on a boat into the interior. So the house was at Lamaya, and I could be saying that wrong. Lamaya. Okay. Let's just say the LG. The house is at the Gardens. Let's say the Gardens. The house is at Gardens in Georgetown. And this is actually the capital of Guyana. And this house, as you can see, has 2 stories. This is the actual house. It has 2 stories and is a painted house, and it's on the outskirts of town. And this area at this time had goats and sheep that grazed past it during the day with their kids and lambs because this was the time of the year when they have like the young. And there was a military base nearby actually, and the temple residents could hear the band drilling at all hours. The men would sometimes watch and march past the house, and Edith enjoyed watching them. She wrote it down in her journal. And, like I said, like, she enjoyed watching the Guyanese military band march past her window. This was in a way, like a 63-year-old woman on vacation. Not at this point indicating a journal of someone in distress, more so a journal of someone who is truly happy to be here, on her way to her forever, the future of her life. And that's kind of something I want you to feel in your chest because I feel like the easy version of the story is more like Edith was a brainwashed victim being held prisoner in a foreign country. But on January 21st, 1978, by all regards, she was content. She was looking forward to her future. She was watching baby goats and reading a book that she had been trying to find for years and making notes and writing letters home to her sister and her friend LOR that she planned to send by, I think they called it surface mail. She was, in the simplest sense of the word, happy. Now the house. Inside the house on January 19th, the day we are camped on, there are roughly 20 people. Some of them live there permanently. Some of them, like Edith and her travel companions, were passing through on their way to Jonestown. The permanent residents were the temple's Georgetown operation. These were the people who handled the interface between the jungle compound and the outside world. The provisions, paperwork, politicians, the press. And I want to tell you some of who of them were, because every single one of these names is going to come back, and most of them are going to be dead within the year. Sharon, Shawanda, Amos. Sharon, inside the house, her name is Shawanda, y'all. And this is a white woman in her 40s. She's the coordinator. She's the one who took Edith's group to immigration and coached them on how to lie. Sharon's basically a divorcee with 3 children, okay? She has 2 girls named Leanne and Krista, and she has a little boy named Martin. I feel like in the second picture of her that this is a mix of one of the twins and the boy, but I'm not exactly certain. But Sharon had taken the name Shawanda inside the temple because it was part of her identification with the church's Black majority membership. I'm not kidding. A lot of white members did this. Some of it was sincere. Most of it was definitely performance, okay? And a lot of it was Jim's deliberate strategy of dissolving the white members' individual identities into the group identity. So it was interesting because Sharon being called Shawanda inside the temple, but she was hey, wipe that name back up. Wipe that name back up when you talk to the other people. Like I don't even know if they really would care, but like maybe they would just think it was something fancy, like Shawanda. I don't know. But whatever. Having that double name is just very interesting because it's just like to me like a small example of the double life a lot of the committed members were committed to living. So I want you to hold her name though. Sharon Amos. On the night of November 18th, 1978, in the same house right here. 10 months from this Thursday, actually, she's going to receive an instruction over shortwave radio from a man in the jungle. We know who he is. And she's going to walk into a bathroom with her 3 children, 11, 10, and 10. And she's going to slit their throats and then her own with a knife in this house in that exact house. So we are walking through right now. She's also the woman teaching Edith how to lie at immigration on that Thursday, too. She's both of those things. She was the perpetrator and the victim at the same time. She was running game on the new arrivals because Jim was running game on her. The whole pyramid, I think, was in her body, and that's what makes this hard to hold in our heads, but it's also the thesis, I think, of this entire series is gonna be that people can be both at once. People can be doing real harm and suffering real harm in the same hour of the same day. In a sense, that's what codes are, right? This is what abusive institutions are. They make perpetrators out of victims and victims out of perpetrators, and the lines between the two collapse until the only person at the top who is purely a perpetrator, okay? He ain't no mixture, purely a perpetrator, is one man in a sweaty shirt with a microphone in his hand and cocaine just dripping up out of his poozes, pores. That's what it's called. Sorry. I just can't stand him. Sharon Amos was a victim of that man. And on January 19th, 1978, in this house, she's also perpetrator, teaching this woman, a 63-year-old retired English professor, how to lie on a foreign government on his behalf. So just hold that. Then we get to Helen Sweeney. She's the cook. She's right here in the purple. She had broken her arm and could not work the kitchen, which is why a younger woman named Jewel Wilson had taken it over, which is why Edith and Jewel end up arguing about dishes. Helen is has been one of the very early Annapolis members back in the 1950s, actually. Basically being with Jim Jones for almost 2 decades. She followed him from Indiana to California to, I want to say she went from Indiana to Brazil, maybe, then to California, then to Guyana. I could be wrong, but what I'm not wrong about is that she's going to die at Jonestown. And then we have Tim, Mike, and Terry Carter Jones. 3 siblings, young adults. I'm pretty sure this is them, not 100% certain. I don't have any other photos of them. I think this is them when they're a baby. We have 3 siblings. At this point, I believe they're 3 young adults. And they're temple members. The Carter young people, that's what Edith calls them in the journal. Tim Carter is going to survive Jonestown, actually. And again, I don't know which out of the 3 kids is who. But Tim's going to survive because on the day of the massacre, he's actually going to be sent out of the compound on an errand. He's carrying a suitcase full of money. But Tim's going to watch his wife, Gloria, and his infant son, Malcolm, die before he leaves. Mike Carter is also going to survive. Terry Carter Jones is going to die. The same family, 3 people, 2 survivors, 1 dead, and they're all in this house drinking Pepsi and watching Streisand on this Thursday. I know it's sort of weird because I only have the picture of them as babies, but this is the point where they're adults. I think this picture was taken when they were most likely in Annapolis with their family. Simon, she's a senior temple member who had arrived in December, staying in Georgetown because she had a blood condition and she needed a medical test. Then we have Richard Janero. He's married, active in the operations of the house. He's actually the one who put on the Streisand movie that night, On a Clear Day You Can See Forever, which I kind of keep mentioning because the symbolism of that exact film playing in that exact house on that exact night, I think is one of the most cruel coincidences in the entire archive. The film, if you've never seen it, if you've ever seen it, but is about a woman basically in modern New York who, under hypnosis, remembers her past life as a Regency era English aristocrat. And the whole movie is about basically, I think, who do you become when somebody else gets inside your head, kind of. And Streisand, she sings the title song, and there's this other psychiatrist who hypnotizes her. And it's just so interesting that this was the film these people put on after dinner on the night before the boat to the jungle. Like, you just can't write this. You just can't. And then we have Shanda Oliver. She was formerly Shanda James. She's a Black woman. She's actually the one who was assigned to take the stool test to the health office. That was literally her job. She was, on the morning of January 20th, 1978, going to gather the stool samples of the household, actually, to carry them across Georgetown to a government health office because the Guyanese state would let the household legally travel to the interior. They basically need to test for the parasites. They didn't want like a outbreak of sickness coming from the people in Georgetown and basically getting everybody else sick in Guyana. But Miss Shanda Oliver, she's 26 years old and she's gonna die at Jonestown as well. And then there are the children. In this house at Georgetown on January 1978, there are 2, and I want you to hold them both. There's Camille Tom. She's nearly 2 years old. She's a daughter of Marcia Simon. She's one of the women who flew in with Edith, actually. And Camille traveled from California on her mother's lap. She is in this house tonight with Edith and everybody else, and she would not settle down on her mattress on the floor. and she was crying, and her mother, Marcia, would not discipline her, so Edith actually shouted at her until she went to sleep. Edith literally shouted at a 2-year-old to go to sleep so Edith could go to sleep. And then she wrote about it in her journal because Edith wrote down everything in her journal. Well, Camille's gonna die at Jonestown. She's gonna be 3 when she dies. And then we got Monique. She's about 2 years old. She's the granddaughter of a woman who is already at Jonestown, actually. And her biological mother abused her, and the temple took her in. And they were toilet training her in the Georgetown house in January 1978. They actually spent a lot of time on it. And Edith said that she found her intelligent and active. And they all received a lot of enjoyment from watching her. But Monica's gonna die at Jonestown. She's 2. I want to give you a second. Because that one kind of like took me out the first time I really realized it. That they received so much enjoyment from watching her learn to use the toilet, watching her intelligent, active little body figure out the world. They love that baby. Edith loved that baby. If you read the journal entry, you can hear it in the way she wrote about it, the way she noticed. That baby was being loved in that house on that Thursday by every adult in the room. And in 10 months, that baby is going to be one of the 304 children in the field. It's a horror. It's not that the cult hated the babies, it's that the cult loved the babies. By the time the babies were killed, I think that's so much worse, right? I think that's the worst version of the story, that the babies were loved by people who killed them on the order of a man who also said he loved them, and the love was in some twisted, manipulated, real way there. It was there in Sharon Amos. It was there in Edith. It was there in the woman whose name was on the licenses, Marceline. The love was real. This, I think, is what makes the killing unbearable. If it had been hate, I feel like you can understand that a little bit more. Like, hate's not simple, but it does make sense. But it was love. It was love that had been weaponized into something so distorted, so braided in with fear and obedience and exhaustion and isolation and pharmacology and the voice on the radio, that by November of 1978, the adults in the field were going to pour poison down their baby's throat because they had been taught for years that this was the most loving thing they could do. And every single Sunday, every single one of these adults on this Thursday, January 19th, 1978, they were just playing with the babies in their house in Georgetown, watching them toddle around, totally training them with patience, eating fried cassava, watching Barbra Streisand, drinking Pepsi. And this is what dying looked like before it looked like dying. It looked like a Thursday. Okay, so now I kind of guess I want to talk about the actual title of this episode. Because I don't even know how long I've been here. Because y'all just be talking. Okay, so I've been about 40 minutes. And I haven't really explained it yet, and I want to because I think this is the part that I remember when I first read the journal. I had to like just put my laptop down and like walk around my apartment. I mean, I say walk around my house. Okay, so basically, like, it's just so the after entry where she's talking about it is it's on her January 19th entry, and this is in the meeting after dinner, after the Streisand movie, after the cassava. Like, it's just insane because she just either just casually records the list of jobs that has been assigned to the household for that day in this entry. And, like, she basically lists them like the no big deal, like just the way you would write a chore wheel almost. Shonda will take stool test into the health office. Like, that's literally the whole sentence. Shonda will take stool test into the health office. Like, mines would like be like, I had a poop in a cup. What? For what? Why? I had to ask why. I had to ask for what. I had to ask how much you need. I had to ask. This is gross. I had to I had to ask, can I have gloves to do my own sample? Cause yuck. But yeah, like that's really the whole sentence and the way she said it. Like, Shonda will take the stool test into the health office. Like, if you're really like, okay, come on, read it like a chore with me, okay? Sharon will meet with government people. Okay. Other people will be on the radio. Okay. Some people will clean the garage. Some will water the yard, sweep and buff the floors. Some people will cook, wash dishes. Some people will watch the children. Some will put provisions on the boat. Okay. And Shonda will take the stool test into the health office. It's insane, but because everybody in this house was about to travel into the interior of Guyana, into a place where parasites were a real thing, where the Guyanese government, this is a very poor post-colonial country with a fragile public health infrastructure, it basically required every single person who's going to live in a remote interior settlement to be tested for intestinal parasites because before they were granted internal travel clearance to go, because Guyana did not want a parasite outbreak coming back out of the jungle, which is a very reasonable public health policy. And I honestly think this is the kind of policy a competent state would have. So it makes a lot of sense. But it led to Edith 63 years old, decorated English professor, if you want to ask me, gives a sample in a cup in a People's Temple bathroom, probably the night before. And you know what? The samples would have to sit somewhere when you really think about it. And what if they were in the fridge or in a cool? They probably had a label too with each one, like Edith Roller, Joe Wilson, Harold Cordell. Jones probably had to do it too. Roosevelt Turner, Barbara Simon, Marcia Simon, Camille Tom, age 1. Possibly little Monique's too. I don't know. The journal doesn't say that at least, okay? And then like on the next day, on January 20th, 1978, a 26-year-old, she's a black woman too, whose temple name was Shanda Oliver and whose government name was Shanda James, she gets into a vehicle and she drives that batch of samples to a Guyanese government health office and turns them in. Really picture this with me, okay? Like, sit with what it took for these people to do this. The dignity they were willing to surrender, the bureaucracy they were willing to comply with, the level of commitment to this move that they had already reached before they ever set foot in Jonestown. People, at least as far as I know, they don't submit stool samples to a foreign government for vacation. They don't submit stool samples to a foreign government for a weekend getaway or to anybody unless they and their bodies and their bones have, to me at least, I say that this is a place that they are going to be like in for the rest of the days, okay? And Edith Roller had decided. She had decided in San Francisco months earlier. She had already been signing away her affairs. She had been packing her trunks, buying waterproof boots at Kaplan's Army Surplus on Market Street for $20. She had been getting her hair done, writing her will effectively by handing over her financial life to her friend LOR. And by the time Edith Roller submitted the sample, she had already moved to Jonestown in her heart's where I'm getting at. Like the physical move was just the formality. She had decided. And she decided because of everything we are going to spend the next 11 episodes telling you about, because the help was real. The community was real. The integration was real. Political work was real. The babies in the next room who needed someone to love them because their biological mother had abused them and the temple was loving them. And Edith believed in the loving because the loving was happening right in front of her. Don't y'all see that that's the seduction? It's the whole seduction. The cult never starts with the cult, right? Doesn't the cult always starts with the help, or a lot of times at least? And by the time you can see the cult, the help has already happened to you or your mother or your brother or your son or to a toddler in the next room whose name is Monique and she's intelligent and active and who you have spent the whole afternoon watching learn how to use the toilet. By the time you can see the cult, you're already in the cup if you want to get there, okay? You're already at the health office. You're already on the boat. All right, let me introduce him now. I've been holding off on him as long as I can, but he is in the house on the night of January 19th, even though he is physically 200 miles south in the jungle. He is in the house because his voice is almost like a throwaway line. There's a journal entry from Edith for that day. She said, all the household came in. Sharon said Jim is on the radio. Said he had worked in the fields using a new watering system. That is the man. That is the introduction. That is how Jim Jones will enter this series. Not in a casket factory, wedding, pulpit, not yet. I want him to enter as a disembodied voice on a shortwave radio mentioned in passing by another woman while the house goes on about its evening. He's so embedded in the daily fabric of these people's lives that the journal, it actually doesn't even really describe him when I think about it. He's just Jim. Jim is on the radio. No further explanation than the way you would say, the kettle is whistling. He's ambient. He's background. He is the weather. And what is he saying in this entry? Is he ranting or calling out for blood? Is he prophesizing nuclear war? No. He's saying he worked in the fields using the new watering system. He's talking about irrigation. This man, who in 10 months is going to be standing under a tin roof in the jungle screaming into a microphone as 918 people die around him on this Thursday in January, is talking about sprinklers. He's basically the boss reporting on his day. He worked in the fields. He used a new system. It is working. Good night. But I think what I want you to hold and what makes this kind of like bone coat to me is that this is what he sounded like to them every day. He's not in the daily texture of life a monster. No, instead he's the boss. He's the founder. He's the voice on the radio you tuned into on the evening like you would tune into the BBC or the NPR. He's on the news. He's the weather. He's the texture of the day. And occasionally on the same radio, he would say something darker. Maybe calling out a member, naming a defective, saying that the United States was about to round them all up, put them in concentration camps. He would say a child had been poisoned and he had personally healed him with his hands. And he would call a white knight, and the whole compound would assemble in the pavilion and rehearse killing themselves. They didn't know. He knew. But on this Thursday, January 19th, he was talking about sprinklers, the irrigation, and the people in the Georgetown house were not afraid of him on this Thursday. They weren't. Like, if you read the journal, Edith does not write about Jim with fear. She writes about him with respect and admiration and a sense of significance, but not with fear. Not yet. Not on January 19th. But by February, the fear is there. By April, the fear is all over the journal. And by summer, you can feel her breaking down on the page. But on January 19th, she is still in the honeymoon of arrival. She has just gotten there. She's excited. She's making notes. She's reading her book. The voice on the radio is the voice of the man who built the place she's moving to. And the place she's moving to, by every report she received in San Francisco, is paradise. But Mama is wrong. She is so deeply, so completely, so unbearably wrong. And the reason this episode is called the Stool Sample and not Jim Jones Part 1 is that she is what matters about the wrongness. She is the cost of it. She is the body the wrongness took. Jim Jones is going to come later into the series. We're going to spend whole episodes on him eventually. Ugh. We're gonna talk about his mama and the casket factory and the rock he threw at somebody's head when he was 8. We are, I promise. But not yet. Not in this episode. Because if I put him at the center of this episode, I feel like you'll stop seeing Edith. And I won't let you stop seeing Edith because she is the whole point. So he gets one line. He gets the sprinklers. He gets the radio crackle and the offhand mention from Sharon Amos, and then he gets dismissed back into the background where he belongs in this particular Thursday of this particular woman's life, because this Thursday is not about him. This Thursday is about her. It is about her on the couch with her book in her hands. So let me take a second to go over what the journal actually is and like talk about the journal itself, because we're going to be living with this document for the entire rest of the series if I can have it my way. And I want you to understand kind of what we're working with. Edith Roller kept a daily journal from the time she joined the People's Temple in 1975 until the morning of November 18th, 1978. Kept it daily, every day. Sometimes a page, paragraph, sometimes, especially in the early days when she's working at Bechtel, if that's how you say it, and going to services in the evening, 8 or 9, 10 pages a day. Recording who said what at the people rally, who was on the floor, who got chewed out, praised what the offering was, what the food was, who was crying, who left early, who came late. A lot of times she did it in shorthand because she was a trained clerical worker, so she could. In her early Bechtel era journals, you can see her transcribing entire speeches in stenographer's shorthand, if I said that right. The journals actually ended up becoming confiscated by the FBI after the massacre, along with everything else recovered from Jonestown. And so they became part of the FBI's massive Jonestown evidence collection, and it was codenamed MUR, which stands for Ryan Murder, because the FBI's initial case was actually into the murder of Congressman Leo Ryan at the airstrip. And so her journals basically set in a vault. And eventually, because of the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request, a man named Don Beck, who I want to name because Don Beck is one of the heroes of historical preservation in the story, he sits down with these handwritten pages and he transcribes every single one of them by hand, word by word, filling in gaps where the Xerox was illegible. He even notated where pages were missing, and he built a complete archive of Edith Roller's life from 1975 to 1978, and then he donated the transcriptions to the Jonestown Institute at San Diego University. So you can go read them right now, today, on a free public website, and I'm going to make sure I link it. And I want you to understand what a gift this is. What an unbearable, devastating, miraculous gift it is that we have this. Most of the people who died at Jonestown did not leave us a single line in their handwriting. They died, and the historical record just kind of absorbed them as numbers. But Miss Roller, she refused to be a number. She wrote down what she had for breakfast on January 12th, 1978, in enough detail that I can tell you about it on YouTube in 2026. And by the way, she had grapefruit and oatmeal. But she left us her breakfast, and she left us her hair appointment and the price of her boots. And she left us the argument she had with Joel Wilson about the dishes, y'all. She left us the night Camille Tom had not gone to sleep and Edith shouted at her. And she left us the night she watched Streisand and ate cassava and thought it tasted like potato chips. Miss Roller, 63 years old, retired English professor, dying in less than 10 months without knowing she was dying, left us her soul. And the least I can do as a wannabe storyteller is read her out loud to you with her name in my mouth. So this is what the series is going to do. This is what we're going to do here. We're going to read Miss Roller. We're going to let her carry us into a story that you think you know and that you probably don't know at all. Maybe. I don't know. And by the time we get to the night of November 18th when she dies, you're gonna know what she had for breakfast that morning. So I'm not gonna let you forget her. Child, I ain't gonna let nobody forget her. That's kind of a promise. So this is part one. Miss Edith on the couch with the book, with the cassava, with the cup that Shanda's gonna carry to the health office in the next morning. That's the door. So it's late on the night of January 19th, 1978. The Streisand movie is over, the cassava's gone, the Pepsi cans are stacked by the sink, the babies Monique and Camille are finally asleep, Sharon Amos, who tomorrow morning is going to be Sharon Amos again. When she walks into the government offices. Tonight she's gonna be Shawanda, y'all, putting her own three children to bed in the same house. I believe Leanne is 11, Krista's 10, and Martin's 10. They have no idea. They're sleepy. They had cassava too. And Helen Sweeney with her broken arm is asleep somewhere. Tim, Mike, Terry, Carter are somewhere in the house. Richard Janero is putting away the projector from the movie. Joel Wilson is asleep on the floor of the dining room because the talkers in the other room refuse to quit. And Edith noticed and Edith wrote it down because Edith wrote everything down. And Edith's on the couch with her book and she's reading. It is past midnight in Georgetown, Guyana. The shortwave is silent now. The voice on the radio said his piece and went to bed in his own clearing 200 miles south. The military band stopped drilling hours ago. The goats are sleeping. The lambs are sleeping. The whole house is just breathing. And we have Miss Roller reading a Soviet parapsychology book at 63 years old on a couch in a house in a country she had been in for less than 72 hours. And on the night before a stool sample with her name on it was going to be carried across town in another woman's care. On the eve of a boat journey she did actually not take for another week. On her way to a settlement in the jungle that she had been told was paradise. And she was happy. She really was. And in 10 months from this very minute, almost to the day, on the night of November 18th, 1978, Miss Roller is going to be lying in a field at Jonestown with a cup of cyanide laced flavor aid in her hand or her stomach, dead at 63, alongside 917 other human beings whose names we're going to spend the next 12 episodes learning, including Shanda, Aaron, Ann, Krista, Burton, Nick, Mel, every adult and every child in this house on this Thursday, except one, is going to die in 1978 because of a man on the radio. But not tonight. Tonight she is reading, tonight she's happy. And in order for you to understand how the woman on the couch got to the field, we have to back up. Not to her birth, not to her childhood, not yet. We have to back up just a few days. Because before she was on this couch, she was on a plane. And before she was on the plane, she was in a snowstorm at JFK eating a $2.50 sandwich. And before that, she was in Gary Boulevard in San Francisco getting her hair done. And on that boat, on her way upriver to the place she did not know yet was the place she's going to die, she was going to start writing things down that when you read them are going to crack you open. So next time we get on the boat, part two of the boat, if you made it all the way through this, thank you and welcome to the series. I know this was a slow burn. I know I did not give you the cult monster yet. I did it on purpose. I'm gonna give him to you eventually. I promise. Maybe so, but for now, I want you to meet Edith. I want you to love her the way I love her because we're gonna walk her, okay, together from this couch to that field. And I can't do that with you if you don't love her first. So if you're here, if you care, like tell me in the comments, like if who was Edith to you? Did you feel anything with her sitting on the couch? Can you relate to, finding the book a good read you want to read, you know what I'm saying? Even though I know we're more in 2026, you can kind of find what you want online to read if you wanted to. But, you read that feel before? But, like, do you see somebody in her, your professor, your aunt, your mama, yourself? Like, did the stool sample take you off? Did the babies do anything to you? Like, tell me. I just want to know. And before part two, if you care, if you want to know, go to the Jonestown Institute website. Search her name, Miss Edith Roller, EdithRollers. Look for her journal for January 1978. Just look at it. I some of the real pages here, right here. These are the real pages. She had some that were written with her handwriting, and she had some that she typed. But go look. See the dates. See her page in her own hand, alive, because she was alive when she wrote it, and she is now. In the only way the dead can kind of be alive, which is in the reading. So read her with me. Anyone's here, I love you. Stay safe, stay critical. Hold somebody you love close tonight. And remember, it always looks like a Thursday.